Hi, everybody. My name's Carrie. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My home group is the New Horizons group in beautiful Bend, Oregon, and I am living in those maintenance and growth steps, 10, 11, and 12. I call them maintenance steps because that's what the book calls them. But when I maintain my lawn and I mow it and water it and fertilize it, it seems to grow. So that's something that happens naturally when I maintain my spiritual condition. So what I'm gonna start out on, I think we left off on page 25 in the middle of There is a Solution, right in the middle of the page too. So I'm just gonna go ahead and start reading. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Now, this is one of three asterisks that tell us to go to the spiritual experience in the back of the book on Appendix 2. So I'm going to go ahead and flip to that. And I'm not going to flip to it every time we get to an asterisk that tells us to go there, but this seems like a good one. This is where I usually go when I'm working with a new person, taking them through the steps. So I'm going to flip to the back, and in this abridged study edition, the Appendix 2 starts on page 183. So, spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms. Yet it is true that our first printing gave many readers the impression that the personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous. And remember, the appendixes, they weren't here when the book was originally written. And so what that's telling me is all of those, like AA number 3, right? Oh, he had such an amazing story. The two visited him, Bill D, and all of a sudden, after he had made, I don't know, 6 trips, I think it was, in 3 months to the hospital, drunk, after Bill and Bob came and visited him, he recovered immediately, never to drink again. And that's one of those experiences that is immediate, right? And it talks about that quite a bit in some of the first 164 pages. And so what they're telling us here is, yes, these things happened, but they're by no means the rule. And we didn't mean to give the impression that this is how it has to happen for you. So I'm going to continue reading. In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. Though it was not our intention to create such an impression, many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by a vast change in feeling and outlook. Now, among our rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. I had an experience with this when I was first coming around Alcoholics Anonymous. My best friend, who I met in AA, we were we were litter mates, right? We got sober like 2.5 months apart from one another, and we had very different experiences. I did not have an overwhelming, vast change in my attitude and outlook. I did not have a burning bush. I did not have a white light experience. And she would say things like, when God separated me from alcohol for the last time, and I'd be looking at her like, what? I can't even walk down the cheese aisle. Like, I can't even walk down the cheese aisle in the grocery store because it shares an aisle with, and she could go out to clubs and dance. And I'm like, I stuck at home when people are asking me what I'm doing. I'm like, I'm staying home, not drinking. And then tomorrow I'm going to be not drinking. And that's how, and I was going to 2 to 3 meetings a day, like that's how my early sobriety looked. And so she made my fourth step. I'm just going to say it, right? She made my fourth step because it's like, we have this furniture store here in Central Oregon called M. Jacobs, and it's really pricey. It's really expensive, but it's really nice, right? And when you buy a piece of furniture there, not only does it already come assembled because it's really quality furniture, but they actually deliver it, right? And they'll even take your old furniture away for you at no cost. And that's what I felt like she got. And me, it feels like I had to shop at IKEA, and put my spiritual experience together with some instructions. But thank goodness they're clear-cut instructions. It's a set of 12. And for me, that's what I needed. I had a spiritual awakening as the result of those 12 steps. And although I was very resentful for a while, until I had my own spiritual experience, right? Until I had my own spiritual experience, I thought, this isn't fair. Why me, right? And now I understand why me. It's because if I didn't have the experience that I had, I couldn't help the people that I can help today. I couldn't say that I didn't have that spiritual experience until going through these steps. And so I'm fortunate that that I guess I got IKEA, right? I guess that's something that I'm grateful for today, and it wasn't always the case. Quite often the friends of the newcomer are often aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. I was probably 2 years sober. We go to this ranch every year. It's called Honeywell Guest Ranch in California. It's the oldest dude ranch but my family has been going there for years. And I was, about 2 years sober, and I was meeting with my sponsor, and I was telling her I can't go. My family is all alcoholic. All they do is drink there. There's no meeting there. It's this little tiny town, Bridgeport, California. And the closest AA meeting is like Reno, which is, I don't know, almost 2 hours away. They have one meeting in that little town, Bridgeport, at 7 o'clock on Wednesday nights. And they have for years. I remember my dad used to go to it when I was growing up, because this is a family reunion that we've been having since, my grandma and my grandpa met there actually as kids. And that's how they met. But I remember that I was telling my sponsor I couldn't go, that I was going to have to sit out the family vacation because at the time I was going to 2 to 3 meetings a day. I was running around talking about how meeting makers make it, a meeting a day will keep the drink away, all these things that I heard in meetings. And she said, "What do you, why do you feel like you can't make it?" And I said, "Well, because there's no meetings." She goes, "Oh, you think meetings keep you sober?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And she goes, "Okay, let me ask you this. When is the last time you thought of a drink? You thought of drinking?" I don't know. I don't know. She goes, "Carrie, you're a recovered alcoholic." I'm like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah, you're a recovered alcoholic. Meetings don't keep you sober. 10, 11, and 12 is where you're living. And you can do 10, 11, and 12 with God anytime. And you're going to be in contact with your sponsees. Your phone still works. You're going to be fine." And I'm like, oh my God, I was in so much fear. I went and I went to the one meeting. In 10 days, I went to one meeting. And this is the first time I had ever even gone 2 days without a meeting in my entire sobriety. And I came home in better spiritual condition than when I left. because I got to spend that time with God in the wilderness, riding horses and being with, it was amazing. And so, of course, like any good alcoholic, I notified my sponsor that she's right. I am cured and I no longer need AA, because I went a whole week with only going to one meeting, and I didn't even think about drinking. And not only did I not think about drinking, but I'm more spiritually fit and connected to God than I have been living my life in AA meetings. And she said, "Oh, well, that's wonderful. But how are you going to carry the message? Are you going to sit in front of the mirror and do it to yourself?" And I said, "Oh," she's like, "Yeah, you don't have to go to meetings anymore, Carrie. Now you get to. Now you get to." And it was quite the experience, because my sponsor realized long before I had myself. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. That happened for me. My sponsor knew it. I didn't know it. And to this day, I have never thought about a drink, and I haven't even had a drinking dream, and it's been well over a decade. So what often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. But it didn't say how long it takes to get through the steps in the big book. What often takes place in a few months, years of self-discipline is what I tried before AA. I tried the self-help books. I tried the gym. I tried 90 yoga classes in 90 days. I tried it all, and it didn't work, right? But what these steps did for me in a few short months could have never been accomplished by years of self-discipline, and that has been true for me. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of a spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness. And it does this because we don't have to call it God consciousness, right? That's for the more religious members. Most apathetically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. So that means I can close my mind to 99% of spiritual concepts. I just have to have that seed of willingness, right? I just have to have a little bit of an open mind to look at what the universe is doing for me that I could never do for myself. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one needs to have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, that's the W. Honesty, that's the H. And open-mindedness, that's the O in the WHO of the program, are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. There is a principle which is bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation. So when I came in, I love the WHO of the program. When I came in, I was trying to figure out how to quit drinking and how to put my life back together and how to just make it till noon without a drink, and how do I and when I came in, they told me, don't worry about how. There is one who has all power, and that one is who, right? And I don't think it's any mistake that it's written in this order. Who? Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness. Because how didn't work for this alcoholic. And what worked for this alcoholic is, you guys told me, let go and let God. let go of trying to figure out how to fix it yourself, and let God do for you what you can't do for yourself. So I appreciate the order that all of our literature, all of our, the whole big book, whenever you see those what are they called? The essentials of recovery. Willingness always comes first. And one of the reasons that I've been told willingness comes first is because I have to be willing to be honest. I have to be first, before I'm open-minded, I have to become willing to be open-minded, right? So I can't be honest or open-minded without first becoming willing. And if I can't even be willing, I need to be willing to become willing, right? So willingness for me has to come first. So I'm turning back to where we left off on page 25. If you are a serious alcoholic as we were, I love the tongue in cheek. I love the way Bill writes. But you know, I'm a sarcasm lover too. I admire anybody who can use sarcasm with a straight face and continue going. And Bill does it so beautifully. It's like an art. If you are seriously as an alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. Okay, so what are they? One was to go to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. That's one hand. And on the other hand, to accept spiritual help. Well, although those don't seem like a hard choice to make today, I can tell you, I sat there in early sobriety thinking, oh, what's worse, spiritual help or blotting out the intolerable existence? You know, like I really did have a hard time deciding, which now it's just so insane looking at that and thinking that it's even a decision one has to make. This we did because we honestly wanted to, and we were willing to make the effort. So I remember in the where is it? Page 68, no, 58, page 58, where it talks about, okay. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. So that's like, that's the theme that's throughout this whole book, right? If you've decided you want what we have, which is where it says, if you honestly want this thing, right? And you're willing to make the effort. And that's the second part. And you're willing to go to any lengths to get this thing, then you're ready to take certain steps. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental, for those of you who are still highlighting those two words whenever they're used together, physical and mental condition, were unusually good. Above all, he believed that he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. Self-knowledge avails us what? Nothing. So he returned to the doctor, whom he admired, and he asked him point blank why he couldn't recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems. This is the insanity, right? Yet he had no control whatsoever over alcohol. Alcoholic insanity. And again, page 21, page 7, doctor's opinion, page 38. We can reconcile this with all those pages. Why was this? Well, he begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. The doctor's judgment was he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man, Roland Hazard, still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. So some of our alcoholic readers may think that they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. I mean, exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are a phenomenon. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once guiding forces of their lives, of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I've been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, this method which I employ are successful, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description." And again, remember, this book isn't written for the person who's physically addicted to, a lot of alcoholics become physically addicted to alcohol, but that's not the criteria. This book isn't written for someone who's only physically addicted to alcohol. This book isn't written for someone who has problems, who can quit drinking and be fine and good and not need AA. This book was written for an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, an alcoholic of our type, an alcoholic who isn't just bodily but also mentally different from our fellows, right? An alcoholic who can't just stay stopped because of an overpowering desire to do so. So upon hearing that the spiritual experience could maybe help him, right? Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. His hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. So this is where I take people who, in the book, where I take people who are having problems differentiating between spiritual and religion, right? People who maybe come in with a resentment toward religion, or with a resentment toward some religious body that they've participated in or maybe grew up in. That wasn't my story, but I know a lot of alcoholics who have come in with that being their story. And this is a very helpful part of the book to take those people to and explain, this isn't about religion. While people's religious convictions might be very good, that doesn't necessarily spell a vital spiritual experience. And so there's two different things, really. And I've known people who are religious in the church and they're spiritual. And I'm not saying that they don't go hand in hand sometimes, but I've also known people who are religious in the church who are maybe not, I don't want to say anything bad about people, but I've also seen people, some of the most spiritual people I know, who have never stepped foot into a church. So you can have one without the other. You can have both. And you can have neither. I've seen that before too. But in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you're working out of this book and you're trying to employ the solution that we offer, the spiritual experience is pretty vital. Whether you want to be religious or not, that's your own affair. So here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself. Actually, I'm going to skip down because of respect for time to, we think it's no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, which each one decides in the light of past associations or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such membership. So that's kind of what I was just talking about a little bit, like if you are religious, then that's great. And AA, I've seen, can help you to become even a better member of your church, or even a better member of your yoga class, or even a better member of whatever it is you do outside of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I don't think that there is anything in AA that goes against any of your outside practices. I haven't seen it yet. I'm sure someday maybe I will try to sponsor, I don't know, a Satan worshiper or something, and there might be something, but so far I have not seen anybody, anything that AA asks of me that goes against any outside practices that we favor in such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then the chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who were once in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacles to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions, that's a highlight. That's a highlight. I just want to read the definition of clear-cut too. Clear-cut, clearly and sharply outlined, distinct and definite. Clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. So this isn't exactly a book of suggestions. This is a book that is a suggested program of recovery, right? But there are a lot of requirements in these first 103 pages, which is the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they use the word requirement. And I know at first glance it seems incongruent, right? Because there's a lot of the time we hear in meetings that the steps are only suggested. We have only one suggestion, which is this 12-step program of recovery. But that program is full of requirements. And I guess I'll tell the cookie story, right? My grandma left me the best recipe ever for chocolate chip cookies. And it's not a required recipe. I don't have to use it. I can use the recipe on the back of the Toll House box instead. But if I want to use my grandma's recipe, the ingredients are required. I can't take out the butter and say, well, I'm going to put in applesauce instead because I'm on a diet, and expect it to taste the same. Like, the outcome's going to be a little different. So this is that's how I kind of can rectify the two different angles, because it does say that this is a suggested program of recovery. But it's the only suggestion that we have to offer in Alcoholics Anonymous. So each individual in the personal stories describe I'm sorry, I skipped this last line. These are followed by 42 personal experiences. So what they're saying is that in that last paragraph I read, it's saying that the next chapter is going to be more about alcoholism. The chapter after that is to the agnostic. And then there's those chapters that are going to take us through a clear-cut set of directions to how we recover. And then after that, which we don't have in this book, but it is followed by 42 personal experiences. That's the stories in the back of the book. And each individual who wrote these personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he'd established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear cut, there it is again, and that's another highlight again, idea of what actually happened in their lives. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So I'm going to start on more about alcoholism because it is a really long chapter. It's a big chapter, not super long, but it's a big chapter. Lots to talk about. I'm just going to move on. We're on chapter 3, page 30. This is the first step. This is the page where when I'm not sponsoring someone yet and they come in for their first meeting, you know, nobody comes into my home group for their first meeting without leaving with a big book in their hand. Like my home group members wouldn't let that happen. We force it on you. Like you can't, I mean, even if you want to throw it away when you leave, you're going to be leaving with a big book in your hand. And when we get that new person who has never been to a meeting and I'm showing them what the book is, because we give the hardback with the stories in the back, right? And when I sit down with that new person and I explain what this book is, and that, yes, I know it's called a big book. Yes, I know it looks big. Yes, it looks really overwhelming, but it's only 103 pages of directions that takes you through the 12 steps. You might need a sponsor to guide you through that work. But if you want to start reading now, if you can't sleep at night and you want to start reading from the back of the book, I always suggest the stories, depending on if you can tell they look tore up from the floor up. I suggest that section of the back in the stories where it says they stopped in time, or wait, no, what is it? Hang on. Oh, it's not going to tell me in this book because it's abridged. So there's 3 sections in the back. There's one that our founders, right, like our trailblazers, our stories of the early members, and then there's one for people who they stopped in time. I think is the high bottom, and then they lost nearly all is the section of the people who maybe didn't step off the elevator as quickly as some of us have. And so I judge by, you know, the way they look, if they're receptive to talking to me, sharing a little bit about themselves with me, and I can tell them where I suggest they start reading if they want to, you know, maybe try to start identifying. So along with the stories in the back, directing them to the section that I think they could maybe best identify with, I tell them that they can start reading on page 30, because this is step 1, right? It is the meat and the potatoes of step 1. And I always make the little, you know, not really joke, but I point out that chapter 3 and page 30 both have a 3 in it. So it's easy to remember, because I don't like to mark up somebody's book until I sponsor them. But, you know, I tell them chapter 3 and page 30, it's easy to remember. The first 2 paragraphs, maybe start trying to read in the I and see if that feels true for you. You know, take some time tonight, quiet time, not around anybody, just to yourself, and read these 2 paragraphs in the I and see if that feels right for you. That's the suggestion that I usually give to new people. So most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. no person likes to think he's bodily and mentally. There's that bodily and mentally again for those who are finding those Where's Waldo's from his fellows. Now, when I'm taking a person through these steps and we get to this page, they've already shared with me, because we've already read 30 pages of some of their own experiences, some of their own magic of Me Too, some of their own, like, oh, I remember when I did that one Thanksgiving, I, wasn't going to drink, and then I decided that I'd have some hot buttered rum, blah, 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 right? So I've already heard a lot of their story by the time we're on this page. And so by the time we're on this page, I ask them to read it, and I ask them to read it out loud, and I ask them to read it in the eye. And so what that sounds like, and I say, if it doesn't feel true for you, don't say it, and if you have to change a word or two to make it your own, change a word or two to make it your own. Not at group level, though. Please don't change the words in the big book at group level. Anyway, because it's not the same for everybody in the room. If it's the same for you, that's great. Change the word or two when you're working with me as your sponsor, not in a meeting. So what they say is, I've been unwilling to admit that I was a real alcoholic. I didn't like to think I was bodily and mentally different from my friends, right? See how I did that? My friends instead of my fellows, because that's maybe what sounds okay to them. That's maybe what sounds comfortable. Therefore, it's not surprising that my drinking career was characterized by countless vain attempts to prove I could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, I would control and enjoy my drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. I was pursuing it or maybe I am pursuing it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were real alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that I'm like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed. So that is, as terrible as that sounds, those are the first step promises. First step promises aren't real attractive. If they were attractive, then we would probably not need steps 2 through 12. The first step promises basically tells me that if I continue going the way I am, that this delusion is going to drive me to insanity or death. That's what the first step promises me. The first step is not supposed to have any hope. In fact, the book says over and over again, the more hopeless, the better, right? When you're on the first step, I didn't need hope. I needed pain. The hope comes in steps 2 and 3, right? The hope comes that there is a solution. But when I'm on my first step, hopefully nobody tries to give me some hope. Hopefully nobody's going to be like, hey, you got this. Because that's not what this alcoholic needed. I didn't have this. I needed that gift of desperation. And my husband's now sponsor, he wasn't his sponsor back then, but he was that, loud asshole in the meetings that would tell it like it is, right? He cared more about people's lives than their feelings, and he was that guy, right? And I couldn't stand him, because one of the things that he always used to say is, I'm a fan of pain. I'd be like, what jerk is a fan of pain, right? I was drunk, couldn't get up off of my bathroom floor, sick as a dog. I couldn't even get up to bend over the toilet to puke in the toilet. I was puking on the bathroom floor. And I finally got it. I'm in enough pain that now maybe I'll do the work. So today I'm a fan of pain. And if you're on your first step looking for hope, I hope they don't give it to you. The hope comes in steps 2 and 3. We alcoholics are like men who have lost the ability. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers control. That's hopeless, not hopeful. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's not hopeful. Don't let anybody try to give you hope in your first step. Don't let anybody try to take your bottom from you. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type, there it is again, are in the grips of a progressive illness. That's not very hopeful. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. This is bad news, guys. The first step doesn't have any good news in it. Sorry to break it to you. We are like men and women who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind, there it is again, there's another highlight, because it's not talking about the heavy drinker, right? It's not talking about somebody who just got themselves physically addicted to alcohol. This is talking about the alcoholic of the hopeless variety, the alcoholic of our kind, the alcoholic of our type. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some cases, has been brief recovery, followed always by still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. So you're screwed. That's what this is saying. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they're in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, which is sometimes needed, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Play a drinking game with this. When I was new, and I was hanging out with all the cool kids, right? The fun kids who went to the meetings where everybody's sleeping with everybody, chairs are being thrown, everybody's drinking with everybody, because that's what I did. We had a drinking game on this page. Every time it says drink, drank, or drunk, you had to drink. And this is terrible looking back, but you know, the meetings I liked were not solution-based meetings. I was a bar drinker, so I liked bar drinking looking like meetings, right? I didn't get recovery from there. I didn't get sober from there, but I did spend about 9 months in those types of meetings, playing drinking games with the people that I met in those meetings. So it's every time it says drink, drank, or drunk. So let's think about this. And this is also a really good page for Singleness of Purpose, because notice how it doesn't say using. It says the inability to control our drinking, can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman. Our hats are off to him. Heavens knows we've tried this hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of the methods we've tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks. Never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only during parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, which I've done before, swearing it off forever with or without a solemn oath. Yeah. It's the most embarrassing, mortifying, pitiful, and incomprehensible feeling to find your notified contract you had with, or your notarized contract that you wrote for yourself and took down to your bank teller at 2 years sober when you were drunk. I found that in my file cabinet when I was 2 years sober and I didn't remember doing it. And I could never face that bank teller again because I had her notarize my contract with myself. So yes, with or without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums, accepting voluntary commitments to asylums, which is checking yourself into treatment, right? We could increase this list at infinite item. So we're going to stop there because of time, and we will continue next week at we do not like to pronounce. So I hope that you guys will help me to remember. I'm going to dog-ear my page.
All audio and video files on the District6AA.org website or the District 6 in Area 15 YouTube channel are for personal use only. Reproduction, distribution, and commercial use are not permitted. In accordance with District 6 current practice, no faces are shown in our videos and audio is scrubbed for anonymity prior to publishing. Contributors whose voices are heard have given record and release consent. Opinions expressed by the presenter are their own and do not necessarily represent the group conscience of District 6 as a whole.